Millions of Australian teens woke up this morning locked out of social media. TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, you name it. The world's first blanket social media ban for under 16s is officially live. And so platforms have to remove underage accounts, block new signups, and verify every user through IDs, facial recognition scans, and data analysis. And if they get it wrong, they could face fines big enough to even sting Silicon Valley. And look, it's not seamless. Teens are already finding loopholes like VPNs, and privacy critics say that these verification tools are pretty blunt instruments. But the Australian government insists that the goal isn't perfect policing. It's about reducing the sheer scale of online harm. And South Africa is watching closely. A group of digital law specialists here have already drafted a South African version of the bill. And so they argue that this minimum age of 13 is just far too low, especially when South African children are being exposed to graphic and harmful content, and parents feel pressured into giving devices over that they can't properly monitor. But the hurdle here is enforcement. I mean, outside of these loopholes, these global platforms routinely brush off South African regulators. And so without any real leverage, any ban risks collapsing on day one. And so now the question shifts to you. If Australia has drawn a line in the sand, should South Africa follow suit? Or would our version cause more problems than it actually solves? And if that's how Australia starts a day, well, South Africa isn't far behind. With the ANC confronting its own follow-through problem, the IMF hitting us with these backhanded compliments, and a closer look at the hidden engineering behind our banknotes. My friends, be sure to smash that like and subscribe button. It helps us more than you know. Now let's get into it. The ANC's National General Council is underway this week. It's this 4-day stocktake of the party's performance, policies, and internal fractures. And look, we'll do a proper roundup once the meetings round up on Friday, but the headline going into it is already clear. Ramaphosa is pushing the party to actually implement on the policies it's already agreed to, calling the lack of follow-through, and I quote, a disease we must rid ourselves of. And it raises a bigger point that voters don't always think about. You see, as South Africa heads into another election cycle, voters often fall into this trap of choosing based on personalities or general impressions of a party's brand. But the more logical way to evaluate any political party comes down to two things. So first is policy. What does the party actually stand for on the issues that affect your life? We're talking economic reform, education, basic services, energy, policing, BEE. You get the point. The second then is governance capacity. So when that party has actually held power, be that nationally, provincially, or even in a municipality, have they shown the ability to run things effectively and follow through on the commitments that they make? So no, this week won't answer every question for the ANC, but it will show whether the party understands the standard it's going to be judged against, not for what it plans to do, but for what it can actually get done. The IMF just wrapped up its annual visit to South Africa this past week, and let's just say its report reads a bit like one of my old school report cards, promising signs but still at risk of failing the year. So let's start on the positive side. The fund says that the economy is more resilient than people think. Inflation is settling back down towards that new 3% target. The country's institutions are holding firm, and exiting the FATF grey list has already helped to calm financial markets. But then comes the warning label. Even with Treasury pushing for a tighter budget, the IMF says that South Africa is still heading towards a debt wall. Government wants a 1.5% primary surplus by next year, which basically means earning more money than it actually spends before interest. But the IMF says that won't be enough. To stabilize debt over the next decade, we'd need a surplus closer to 3%. Which means just far tougher decisions on public spending, wages, and struggling state-owned enterprises. So the message is simple. The green shoots are real, but they're growing in dry soil. And so without any meaningful reform, especially in logistics, energy, and the public sector, South Africa risks turning stability into long-term stagnation. And before we cruise on to our Bagel Bite of the day, here's a couple other headlines worth knowing. For starters, WBHO has been appointed to lead the construction and technical development of the 8 billion rand Cape Winelands Airport after securing environmental approval and Growth Points investments. The project now moves into a detailed design work ahead of building a new international-grade runway by 2028. The FSCA has hit Bankso and its directors with 2 billion rand in penalties after finding widespread misappropriation of client funds, misleading advertising, and false promises of unrealistic returns. Now, several executives were debarred, and the regulators now referred the case to SAPS for criminal investigation. And as we hop across the border, Starlink is rallying public support in Namibia as regulators weigh changes to ownership rules that currently cap foreign stakes at 49%. Now, the company wants a license without ceding equity, arguing that easing restrictions could accelerate broadband rollouts across the country. And on to our Bagel Bite of the day. Let's see what you got. The question is, what is sound measured in? Is it A, hertz, B, watts, or C, decibels? We'll give you the answer at the end of the show. Pick up a South African banknote and you're holding a piece of money that is built with far more engineering than most people realize. So tilt the note slowly and you'll see colors shifting, bars sliding inside a security thread, and tiny shapes appearing and disappearing. And none of that is decoration. It's built to confuse scanners and make counterfeiting an extremely difficult task. So rub your thumb across any of the banknotes and you'll feel this raised sandpaper-like texture across some of the sections. And that's deliberate. It's printed with this thick ink that's hard to replicate even with industrial machines. And if you hold any of the notes up to the light, you'll see a watermark either of Mandela or one of the big 5 animals appearing inside the paper, as well as these tiny shapes printed on the front and back that snap together into one perfect image. Then there's the secrets that you don't see under normal lighting. We're talking micro-sized text hidden in the artwork and these fluorescent patterns that only glow under UV. You know, the stuff that the banks use to check for fakes. And so yeah, when you put this all together, it turns a simple banknote into a surprisingly sophisticated piece of everyday security. And as for that Bagel Bite, the answer is decibels, the scale that we use to measure how intense a sound really is. A whisper sits around 30 decibels and a stadium roar can push to about 120. But don't let the numbers fool you. For decibels, the scale is logarithmic, which means that every jump isn't a step, it's a multiplication. And my friends, that's it for today's show. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for our final daily bagel show of the work week. It is going to be a goodie. Hope you guys have a great day further. Be kind to one another, and we'll catch you all tomorrow for the next round of the good stuff. God bless.